Hello and welcome to my video on content strategy. Although we're talking about a modern context, these concepts are ancient. Humans have been using story to pass knowledge since millennia, using verbal and visual communication skills. We call this culture, and our brain is wired to receive story. These techniques are also used to influence behavior. The European folk tales about children running away at night to be eaten by monsters are an example of using story to influence behavior. Holy books build upon these techniques and feature stories to influence people's behaviour in line with their teachings. Then we had the development of scientific study of how our brain works via disciplines of psychology and neuroscience and others. The terms public relations, advertising and propaganda are the same thing. This is the application of science, psychology and neuroscience to influence behaviour. The key tools are story and visual communication. I wanted to put this in context as you design and produce content, that your aim is to influence in some way, and it is helpful to learn some of these sciences and trades. A social media influencer, for example, is expert or intuitive in story, visual communication, general manipulation of some level. Okay, now after that we'll now move to assessing your needs. So this is how content is going to actually apply to what you need it to do. So in this context we want to start with your people. What content do they want? How do they want to consume it? What sort of format or platform? Do they like video content on TikTok? Do they prefer to scroll websites? Do they prefer to have PDFs and print posters? And with that content, how are you going to create connection? Now, your digital assets, such as your website, social media, business profiles, Google business profile, what content do they require? And then if you are investing in social media, what do the platforms require? So Instagram, for example, wants portrait size images, but at their own ratios. TikTok requires videos. YouTube requires video, but that's in a landscape format, for example. And also, what is your publishing frequency? How much are you going to be publishing? How much content are you going to be producing? And also, how are you going to remix that content and use it for different applications? Okay, so next thing we want to look at is developing your brand personality. So we talked about brand personality in previous modules. Now, this is applying your visual communication and story to that brand personality. So we need a brand kit. So we'll be all familiar with brands in modern society. Logo, fonts, colors. Also things like graphic elements. So there might be little graphic elements that you may have on your website, or some patterns, or a splash of color that you add on the corner of your image that represents your brand. Also things like Canva templates, or templates that you can use to quickly add your brand to some content and then pump it out. So for example, this document here, this is using very simple content in Canva, template in Canva. And I've got another one that I'm using, which is out of Google Docs. Now I'm using those different platforms because they're the quickest and most efficient way to get content out. And then I've added my brand to those and colors and things. Your visual style. So this is the aesthetic. Are you going retro? Are you going to have a more of a punk aesthetic? Are you going to be very polished and professional? Are you going to be like New York model? Are you going to be like down to earth Aussie Ocker? So all these are visual style aesthetics, and it would really depend on how you produce your content. So if your style was a really high-end fashion New York, that means then you'll need to have high-end professional photographers. Whereas if you're a bit more down-to-earth family, then you can use like low-quality imagery. And by low quality, I don't mean bad. I mean using your phone, produce quality content using your phone, and you'll be able to produce content to that aesthetic style. And that also includes production quality. Also the subject matter. What sort of subject are you dealing with? And what subjects will you include in your visual style? Now, your written style includes how you write copy. So your apprehension level is uh, who can understand your copy. So, for example, the Herald Sun has a comprehension level of a 12-year-old, or might be 14-year-old. So they don't write any copy that can't be understood by an average 14-year-old. As part of that, you'll be looking at what vocabulary are you using, what jargon is appropriate and what isn't. So if you're really targeting an industry, then you'd use that jargon. Whereas if you're not targeting an industry, you would then exclude your industry jargon, or you'd explain it. Also, the tone of your language, and then how you structure your syntax. Do you use really long sentences? Do you have really short, punchy sentences? Now, once you've got your brand personality, then you can look at your actual content that you're going to direct. So I mentioned story is a big deal before. It's an ancient human knowledge transfer system. And in a modern context, we have story frameworks that you may apply to your content. So for example, the 3-act structure, which is basically a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you're doing a very short Instagram video, then you may use that framework to have a beginning, middle, and end. The hero's journey is quite a famous, more long drawn out one, which Star Wars is based on. And so it's the story of a hero going through different phases of his journey. There's also a drama triangle, which basically has a villain, a victim, and then the hero. And these techniques are really useful in being able to frame stories to make them much more engaging and much more interesting and more likely to people to engage with. Because a lot of these techniques are based on the ancient techniques of storytelling. Now we also have a more modern version of storytelling, and that's the meme or the social hook or social format. So that's where very short form, so memes are very powerful, delivering really strong conceptual or concepts or information in an extremely short format. The social hook is more of the addictive nature of social media, where it's just trying to hook you from your scroll. And so they're using quite different techniques than a normal story would use, where maybe a traditional story would like slowly give you a beginning, whereas a social hook would just get you to the most important part, or the most shocking part, or the most exciting part straight up to hook you in that scroll. It's a different way of writing stories. So if you're in those platforms, then you need to consider that. So in any story, we have people and characters. And when selecting your people, be aware of many biases. Now, back to the neuroscience, there's a concept called attractiveness bias. So that means people will respond, give more attention, and trust more attractive people. Now, that's a weakness in the human psychology. However, it's something that's been manipulated by advertising, who will always promote attractive people. Now, I'm not saying you should use attractive people or not. Be aware of those phenomena and how you present your stories. Now, diversity, culture, and gender are really important. Representation. So, different races. Now, women are underrepresented in traditional media and storytelling. For example, people with disabilities, people from other cultural backgrounds. So, really think about how you can include diversity, because your audience in the Australian population and makeup is a very diverse population. So if you're only talking to the stereotypes, you're only talking to a small part of the Australian population. Emotion is very important with characters and story. We're humans. Now, body and facial language is really important. So learn a little bit about body language. And so when you've got your people, say, posing for a photo, you can look at their body language and go, look, they're being very defensive, and we want them to be relaxed. So, move your hands, bring your hands down. The look on their face is maybe a bit easier to understand. If someone's looking happy, and that's the vibe that you want. Or maybe they look like they're pretending to be happy, but they're not. So maybe you need to have a break from the shoot, and so they can feel more comfortable to actually have more of that genuine happy feel. Now, visual cues are also very important. So say in a website, you've got your call to action up there. So your model may be like looking up there where the buy now button is. So that's also something to think about when you're framing specifically for websites, or if you're doing a visual layout, to actually use visual cues, specifically eye contact, to point to areas where you may want to move people to. And with any story is the stage. So location setting. So if you're a small business, then probably your business is the location. But then maybe your product being used is a better location. Or maybe you're going to think creatively and just jump outside of that and have a creative location. You know, what props do you need to have in that setting? If it's a family setting, you might have a couch and a coffee table. And lighting is key, because like film and photography are arts of light. So if you don't have your own lighting set up, then consider shooting first light or just after. Also late in the evening, late in the afternoon before dusk. That's when the light is the best for this sort of work, because midday you have high saturation, so there's too much light. So you get really good colors. And you'll notice on some autumn days or spring days, you have really beautiful lighting. Like everything just looks like it's glowing. That's because you've got a really ideal amount of light coming in, not too much, not enough. Now, if you, the other thing is you can just grab lamps, other sorts of lights. Now, be aware of the wavelengths of lights. So your fluoro lights, for example, are very white, whereas the sun is a yellow, got a yellow tinge. It's got other wavelengths in it. And as humans, react far better and we feel far more comfortable in a slightly yellow. Building a library and a system. And so by building a library, that means having a whole bunch of images or video that are ready to go, say on your socials, or if you need it in the future for various things. And a system is about how do you produce content on an ongoing way. So if you're running any socials, you'll definitely need a content system. Or if you're just looking at continuing improvement of, say, your accommodation business, then you may be just wanting to update shots every, maybe 6 months, 12 months, or maybe specific times when, the lighting's right. Okay, so there's a few approaches. The first one is stock imagery. So this is imagery that's already been shot, and then you either buy it or it's under a Creative Commons license, or it's free. Now, this is a really good approach to get started, but it depends on your context. So, for example, this digital marketing class, I used a free stock image of a woman on a laptop with a dog making a booking. That was a high quality image. It was in context. It worked really well. The other images I'm using on my Gippsland website come from the Victorian Tourism Department, and they provide a library of high quality tourism images that local tourism businesses can use for their websites. So stock can be very useful and very appropriate. However, if you're talking about just your business, then a lot of times stock will look out of place or look less authentic, and could actually be a really bad approach. The key is to be very sophisticated with choosing stock, because it can be very staged, kitschy, cheesy, and there's so many tropes that you'll need to navigate. Also, a lot of it's American-centric, so you really want to put that in context. Now, on the last page of this document, there's links to Australian stock and also stock with diversity that you can look at and actually get high-quality stock. Now, stock ranges in price. Some of it is quite expensive and some of it's free. Another approach is commissioning. So this is getting a professional to come in. So if you're running your ongoing social media, this is not really a good idea, because it'll just be expensive to run your socials. And unless you're a high-end, highly profitable business, it's just, you're going to lose money. What it's really good for, though, is if, say, for your website, you go, right, I need key images that really show what our business does or what our product is. So those you do want to get shot by a professional, or video, That's your introductory video. That could also be something that might be a business investment later on. So you might say, okay, after I've done all my other work on my visual communication, I've updated my website. Then after 6 months, I'm going to invest in photography, depending on your business. For example, even if you are commissioning this content, it's really important to actually understand what you need and how to direct the photographer. So by producing that content yourself, you can then show that to the photographer, the videographer, and go, this is what I've done, this is what I'm trying to capture, this is my strategy, this is why I've chosen this character, this is why I'm using this lighting. And then that will really help the photographer or the videographer understand what you're trying to achieve, and they can then use their skills and experience, and they might go, well, I actually disagree with you. This would be a better approach. Or like, oh, okay, I understand what you're trying to do there, and I'll be able to help make it better, for example. So there's still lots of value in you trying to do it yourself or doing that planning and strategy, even if you are going to get professional help. And then the other system is a self-production. So if you're running social media, this is key. You're going to learn. You have to spend some time learning the skills, and you also invest time in producing and publishing the content. This is the most authentic approach in producing content. It also allows you to adapt and to really explore your personality. It allows you to respond to trends and respond to other things that are happening in your business environment. It also allows you to be in the right time and place. So again, that beautiful, perfect day where the lighting is great and there's a beautiful rare bird that's sitting in your business in the bush, you can take a photo, or whatever it may be. So if you're regularly taking photos and you're practicing, then you by default just get images that even a professional can't get, because the professional's not going to be there at the right time, in the right place.